Hello, and welcome to the Business of Life. My name is Dr. Ariel King, and today we welcome you. We have a very special guest today, a young person, Mr. Max Tuana, and he's going to be speaking about the importance of language. Sir Max, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. King. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's an honor to be here, and I think that language is a very important topic that a lot of people just aren't very knowledgeable about. I think that I mean there are currently 7,000 languages in the world, which is already a great decrease from the past 500 years due to colonization and other reasons. But right now, experts say that within the next 100 years, we are on track to lose half of the current languages that we have in the world. And that can be due to globalization, due to states that are aggressive to languages that are present within their borders. Um, but let me think. I didn't really prepare uh, a presentation, but it's a topic that I'm very passionate about.
Yes.
Personally, I'll give some background about where I come from and why this is important to me. I was born in and raised in New York City, and my parents are come from diverse origins. My mother is from Barcelona, and my father is Italian American. And at home, my parents really stress the importance of maintaining and learning different languages. So at home, I speak Catalan with my mother and brother. That's my first language, the first language that I learned. And throughout the years, I've learned other languages. I currently speak five languages. I speak French, Spanish, Italian, Catalan, and English. I'm very fortunate to speak those languages, and I think that it's important to dive into the history of indigenous languages and why some people speak certain languages, why some people don't speak the language that their parents or grandparents once spoke. Um, but yeah, I think that language is the basis of identity. Without language, it's very hard to feel like you belong to a certain culture or to a certain nation. And today, if you pull up a world map and you see the borders of the different states of the world, you realize that these are artificial borders created by these states, and that within these borders, within these lines on the map, there are a plethora of indigenous languages, nations, communities, and we can anywhere in the world we can point to examples of this. If we go to Europe, for example, let's pick France. When we think of France, um, we think of a one uniform culture, one French language, but in reality, historically, there have been many languages within the borders that we know of France today. We know of Basque, Breton, Catalan, Occitan, just to name a few. And the reason why a lot of these languages are in a very tough situation today is not an accident. It's completely on purpose. Um, Many states, such as France, have engaged in a systematic repression and annihilation of regional cultures and languages. And they knew that in order to suppress any people having uh, ties to a different identity than the national one, the first thing they have to do is get rid of the language. Um, but yeah, I mean, there was I remember this quote from there was a linguist, I think his name was Max Weinreich. He said that a language is a dialect with an army and a navy. So what does that mean? That's that
That's
that means
fabulous.
yeah. So a lot of for example, just to keep on this example of France, France denominates the other cultural languages within its territory as a quote unquote patois, which is a kind of a derogatory term. It implies that they are not proper languages or they're dialects or derivatives of the proper language, which is French. And
Yes, in
uh,
Haiti, excuse me, Haiti, don't they call that language patois?
yes, patois Creole. Because I think in Haiti, I'm not 100% very well versed in the situation in Haiti, but I think that it was also a mix of other languages that
Right.
people. Um, I think there might be some Spanish, some other indigenous African languages as well within that. But yes, I mean I'm curious. What would you like to hear more
Yeah, I was
about?
going to ask you some questions. I mean, what you're saying is so amazing. And what's amazing to me is that you're a young person speaking about the importance of language, which is actually the key to culture and identity, which means that the first way to keep or lose a culture and identity is through language. So I'm wondering, you said that right now there are 7,000 languages. How many were there before? And the other question I had for you, because as I said, we work with a lot of young people, literally all over the world, and many people can speak the language, but they can't read, and most importantly, they can't write the language. So usually we insist on reports being written in their native tongue, even if they have to get help from family members. So I'm just really curious about that. How many did it start with? And how many are we down to now? And um, what do you think we can do about it, especially with young people? I know we have the same situation in Hawaii. The Hawaiian language went down, and many years ago, when I was a student in Hawaii, the legislature put time, energy, and money to making sure that there was a kindergarten and there was um, Hawaiian language directly, but also Hawaiian culture, because language, of course, mixes with culture. You can't just have the language without the culture. And so there was an effort put with time, energy, and money to make sure that the Hawaiian language didn't die. So I would love to understand more about what you know about this because the truth is it's such an important topic, but I know very little about it.
Yeah, so I think that throughout history, I think that the complete number of languages that we know of that have existed, I think we've had 31,000 languages throughout humanity. I think that's the figure that I last read about. But maybe there are other figures. And I think that I guess I guess discovery of the New World, there were around 15,000 languages in the world. And a lot of the indigenous languages in the Americas, for example, through whether it's disease or other factors, that a lot of the arrival of these people in the New World really contributed to the decline. Um, Now, I think right now, 2022 to 2032, we are in the UN International Decade of Indigenous Languages, I think. So there are efforts to I guess spread awareness and educate people on this topic. Um, but I think it's something that, yeah, a lot of it's worth knowing, because even when I ask myself, like, what is it that we can do on
Yeah.
an individual level? Um, and it's kind of abstract. I think that the main way is to learn the language, enroll in a
Right.
language class that speaks to you, learn about your own cultural roots, your own heritage. Just be very cognizant of that,
Yes.
and maybe trace your ancestry and think, okay, my ancestors, maybe for us in America, for example, where a lot of people are monolinguists and only speak English, maybe do a little searching in your family tree and say, maybe I don't know, my some of my ancestors came from wherever, the Basque country. So
Right.
let me,
Right. Basque
educate
is a
myself,
whole different
learn
other language. Right.
exactly. Um,
Nothing like Catalan. It's not even close.
no, no, it's its own family of languages. And I think, yeah, I mean, maybe promoting awareness, but maybe to harp back to the example of Catalonia and what you were saying about how a lot of people maybe speak the language or but don't really know how to read or write that well. I can give the example of my grandparents who were born and raised in Catalonia, and uh, for those who don't know, there was a dictatorship in Spain from um, from 1939 to 1978, more or less. So it's around 40 years of dictatorship and large repression of the languages that made up the current Spanish state. So that includes Basque, that includes Galician, that includes Catalan, Aranese, to just to name a few. And so my grandparents at home and in their private lives, they've always spoken uh, Catalan, but at schools, when Catalan was just was prohibited to be taught at schools, prohibited in public life and legal life, they never learned how to properly um, write it or read it. I mean, they have some notions now, but even when we text or, they make a lot of mistakes or, but however, my grandpa, for example, he has to read his newspaper in Castilian Spanish because that was just his whole life. He was educated in that way. Um,
But can I ask you a question for that? That's really interesting. Um, as a grandchild of grandparents that brought up like that, what do you think was lost for them in terms of cultural? Was anything lost? And if so, what do you think was lost? And as a result, what do you think was lost being passed down between on the side of your Spanish parent, your parent, and yourself as a result of it being lost from your grandparents?
sure. So, I mean, thankfully, my grandparents passed on the language to their children, my mother included, and she made an effort to pass that language to me when she didn't have to, living in New York, she didn't have to do that. Um, what was lost to them, I think, was a wide array of I guess the perception that their language, which is Catalan, is just as important as any other language and not something that, to be relegated to the home or something to be ashamed of. Where in this case, Spanish Castilian was thought of as the I guess language of prestige, the language of um,
The
international
learned,
prestige, exactly, learning of culture, of the TV
right,
programs, documentaries, books, knowledge, um, art. So their maternal language was one that was, wasn't allowed to take up that much space, and maybe, wasn't one where they could feel, creative in
right.
or
So that's writing too. I mean, so that's books, that's history, that's poetry, even spoken word we have today. A lot of young people like spoken word, right? And that's usually passed down. Um, that's really amazing. As a young person yourself who speaks five languages and most likely understands more languages, um, personally, why is this so important to you? Why is this topic about language, the dying of the language, and also being able to keep that language important to you as a young person?
sure. Well, because I think very simply, I'm terrified at the prospect of these languages being um, forgotten or erased. I mean, because it's not just a method of communication. It's a culture. It's a perspective, a way to see things. It's so much more than just let's find the quickest way to communicate. If you want to do that, let's just Why doesn't everyone let's just make everyone in the world speak English or Mandarin, you know? But
Exactly. Start with the billion people. Let's do Mandarin. Exactly. And even in
exactly.
China, they have I won't say sub-languages, but languages that are important to cultures. That's really good. As someone who grew up with English and also French, because when my mother went to get a doctorate, a PhD, back then it was required to have a second language. So I was taught a second language from a very early age. And also, I had the privilege of growing up in New York, which makes it a lot easier to get to know people in other languages. But what I found as an adult is when I started to learn language, mostly from living in places, not sitting in a classroom, but actually living in the country where the native language is spoken, I started to realize that even the main language, the little town I would live in, would say words differently. And I also started to realize that not everything can be translated from one language to English or English to one language. And there are times that I was trying to explain a concept that I knew in another language through this one word. And I couldn't for the life of me find the word in English because English didn't have that description. So that also taught me at a very late age that you can't necessarily translate one word into another because um, language is more than just a description. It's an understanding of a cultural idea that doesn't necessarily transfer to another language. And I'll just give you one small example. When I was in Germany, I know that people used to say Kinder. I thought, but this person is 40, 50 years old. What do you mean Kinder? Kinder means child. I thought, what do you mean? They're adults. What do you mean children? And then I understood that culturally, anybody within your family that's younger than you, and you have wisdom, and you are the person who is the matriarch or the patriarch of that family, they are Kinder. So in that culture, and it's not in a negative way, like you don't know anything. It's more in a, I want to pass on to you, I want to give you wisdom, I want to make sure that you're taken care of, that you can take care of yourself. So it's in a very kind and loving way. And you would only know that if you understood the language and the culture. So that's just one example of many. And I'm sure you have many more, but this is quite important. May I ask, do you know how to write? Reading is important, but write in these various languages. And if not, which language would you like to know how to write in of the five languages that you know now?
I'm fortunate enough to read and write in all of them. My So actually, I mean, I think my love for languages and it really stems from my mother's emphasis on them. And she actually used to be a school teacher in southern France. So in southern France, there's a part called the Roussillon or Roussillon, which is known as northern Catalonia, where the people and the culture of the people there historically speak Catalan. So she worked at this school. Um, Trying to uh, uh, where the mission of the school was to, preserve um, their culture and language. And I think that that experience made her realize how important it was, and that's why she made sure that my brother and I knew how to read and write. I mean, she was the one who taught us, and um, yeah, and that's why she made us go to French immersion, and because immersion is the best way to learn uh, a
Yes,
language.
I think it is. I did the same for German and for French and learned French through, believe it or not, a music group singing. So we sang all kinds of things and it relaxes and it allows the brain to pick up much more than just writing and reading. I mean, most children, when they learn a language, they don't start with reading and writing or learning to conjugate verbs, do they? They learn one word at a time. No, mine, chocolate, give me,
Right.
demands. And I think that easily to learn demands is the way to start a language. But I did the same. Did you have any cultural immersion in any of the languages that you know now or any of the languages that you are learning?
So yes, so I from a very young age, my brother and I had French immersion. We went to a French speaking school in New York where the vehicular language was French. Um, at home, I was speaking Catalan. I mean, living in New York, we're immersed in English, and so that already built my knowledge of Romance languages, so Latin languages that stem from Latin. And I think that, I mean, once you learn one of them, you have a very good base and advantage to learn another Latin-based language. That's what happens in language groups. And so when I was in college, I became interested in my Italian heritage because my on my father's side, his family came from Italy, but they never passed down the um, the language to him. So there's a gap between great grandparents and me who didn't speak Italian. So I became interested in that, and I started taking classes. And at my school, I went to Middlebury College, and I there was a very interesting way to learn where you can choose to live in what's called a house, or in my case, the Italian house, where you sign a contract where when you live in there, you have to only speak the language of the house, so Italian. So I was
Wow, that's
fortunate that for
fabulous.
right. So for almost for 2 semesters, I lived and when I was in my house, I had to communicate with my other roommates only in Italian. So that really helped.
Wow. So that means that, but that's fabulous because that means that you didn't just speak in Italian, but you listen to Italian, most likely Italian radio, television,
Exactly.
also music,
Yeah, I
right?
think that the vast majority of the learning is outside of the classroom. It's a constant maybe effort, but it's a pleasant effort if you enjoy it, and you know you have to I don't know, in your free time, explore music. Let's just listen to music. You know, if you're doing your laundry and you want to learn a language, put some music on, put some in this case Italian music on, or
Yeah.
watch shows, read books,
Makes a
enjoy.
difference, doesn't it? I
Exactly.
remember Neri Percasso. They were one of my favorite Italian groups that I would learn Italian, or even I guess sometimes being with a host family, or being with somebody or around somebody that knows the language. That's really fantastic. And I think Middle Peru University or college is very unusual in that, but I think that's so 2 years of Italian.
In 2 semesters. I was there 2 semesters, and that was a few years ago. So my Italian is probably not as fluent as it was then, but I still
Or you can remember.
consider myself fluent. Yeah.
This has been such a wonderful conversation about language and culture. May I ask, as a young person, can you tell, I would say young people, because I think sometimes we older people can learn language and at times do, but we think, if I speak English or I speak French or I speak one of the UN six languages, right, which is English, French, Spanish, Russian, Arabic, or what is the last one? English, French, Russian,
English,
Arabic
French,
or Chinese, right? Chinese is the
right.
last one. Then somehow you don't need to speak other languages, but so much is lost. So, what would you say to young people about learning another language?
I would say if we're all connected to other languages. I mean, like you said, there's six main languages. That is such a small and proportion of the languages of the world and the languages that we've had historically, that chances are that if you look within your family, if you look within your ancestry, you're you're very, very likely um to have ancestors that spoke different languages than you spoke today. And I would say, I mean, interest yourselves in it, incorporate it into your daily life. Try to read, write. But I mean, even people who, let's say you think of yourself as someone who's not linguistically inclined, which I think that everyone is, but um, promote awareness. I mean, educate yourself, go to cultural events. There are so much is going on everywhere. You just have to look for it. Um, uh, I was part of the Catalan Institute of America pretty much my whole life. It's like a volunteer organization based in New York, where the goal is simply to to promote Catalan culture, but at the end of the day, you're just hanging out with other people speaking a different language, and it's a nice community. But I think that exists with you could should be able to find some community with whatever language it is, even if it's a more obscure indigenous language, because they are, I think, these are priceless, uh, intangible human capital that is cannot be lost at any cost.
Oh, thank you. That's so passionate. I really want to thank you for speaking with us today about language. It's so insightful and interesting. Thank you for that. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us on the business of life. And we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. King.